As the world's most populous nation, China has 1.4 billion mouths to feed. The constant question is, how will China ensure enough food for everyone? After the pandemic and natural disasters threaten the global food supplies, China is working on better resiliency and self-sufficiency. China has kept food security for 17 consecutive years, with its annual grain output staying above 650 million tons for the past 6 years. But with the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, which together account for about 29% of the global wheat exports, what's the impact on China's food security? And could inflation worsen tight food supplies? I posed all these questions to Professor Wen Tiejun. Take a listen. Right now, we are having a global picture. The global picture is the Russia-Ukraine military conflict. We see that Russia and Ukraine together supply about 30% of the world's wheat, 20% of the world's maize. So with this loss, we're seeing more pressure on the world food prospect. Tell me more about your assessment.
I think that is a very important issue. Your risk is just very urgent. And we all know that, global warming make the Russia have a more arable land. Originally, it's cold, it's froze. But now global warming make Russia produce more grain, and including of Ukraine. So they are now in the war. So especially the spring season, it means very much harm the global green market, but that is one thing. Another thing is I think it's more severe is because American and West country block Russia and make Russia cannot export their grain, and then Russia, even they want to sell their grain, they cannot have the money come back. Right. So that is may worsen the whole global green market situation.
Right. Let me just put to you some of the latest statistics. According to the FAO, of course, that's Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, the prices by the end of February of the world for food, cereal, sugar, meat, vegetable oil, dairy products, all up at least more than 10%. That is a very worrying situation because there are already quite some millions of people living on the verge of hunger. And now things are likely to get even worse. So where is China?
I think that it depends on the local situation. And nowadays, we are not very much worried about the global change. I mean, especially the global green market change. It's because up to now, and the maize and rice and the corn totally import from overseas markets, less than 5%. Some government department announced it's only 2%. So 98% of the grain come from the domestic markets. So even overseas markets has a big change, but internal markets still become stabilized by the storage controlled by the central governments. So in China, I think that it's still be safety and not very much harmed by the global markets.
Professor, if it's not a state secret, how long is China's capability of using its own storage over the years? I know China has been enjoying 17 years of continuous harvest, which means there is quite an abundance of food supply for its own people. But just how long if situations globally going worse? What does that mean for China?
One and a half year. I think that the whole of the storage of the grain can supply the local markets for at least 1 year. So that is China, just as you mentioned, we have a 70 years harvest. And these years, I think that is somehow not only by the investments from the governments, but also by global warming and more rain, not only in the south, but also to the north. So north, there are more terroir land. So means that the north can produce more grain, replace the south, because south have a very much fast of the urbanization, take too much land.
Now, China has been talking about, for example, at the just concluded 2 sessions, in the government work report and later also by China's top leadership, self-reliant on food. Do you think China can achieve that?
I think that up to now, we still be a safety, but if we still continue, if we still want to continue the urbanization, and that will be not easy to maintain the situation. Another thing is more severe. We need to take into the consideration that is a so-called global financialization. We also need to pay attention to the lesson in 2008 is caused by the large number of the American bills printed.
Inflation. Mm-hmm.
It means that they transfer large amount of the inflation to the food market. So it's immediately turn to the crisis, food crisis, grain crisis in these developing countries, especially the poor countries. That is a big lesson. And then the food crisis turned to the social crisis, the social conflicts, and happened in these North Africa and some other Middle East and these countries. So that is we need to pay attention to. We need to take into the consideration to know that the global financialization is that it's more severe than the green production.
Having said that, though, there's another issue, Professor, I want to touch on, which is the seeds. As you may know, China, if I understand right, update its seeds for agriculture, likely to be every 5 years. Now, with geopolitics, with also conflicts going on in the world and the pandemic as well, do we worry in China about updating the seeds quality and having sufficient supply of the new seeds?
I think that you are a specialist in agricultural issues. Just now I mentioned that we have a very important issues inside of agricultural production. The seeds is one of these important issues. And yes, not only the grain seeds, vegetable and water production and animal husbandry, every agricultural sector, we need to have overseas seeds. That is a very bad situation in China. So we cannot just rely on international resources. We need to concern how to maintain the local seeds, how to have a kind of local seeds production and run by the local company, not by the transnational company, by global markets. That is a very severe issue. But nowadays, we don't have enough measure to facing such kind of challenge. So it's very urgent. And I think that the central authority has raised up this policy, try to do something to change such kind of situation, but it needs time.
Right. And finally, before we go, Professor, I know you have been an ardent support of the best measures to be taken not only just for those who consume food products, but also for the farmers as well? Do you think there is a best balance that China can keep and also make it food secured and also make sure there is food safety?
And we are not only emphasize the hardware, but also the software, especially the renew the collective system, because that individual households cannot take the responsibility for this big population countries' green security. So in the hardware, we are very much emphasize the importance of the seeds. We need to have the seed sovereignty by the local, by especially by different local. So, and the second one that we must invest into the local agricultural infrastructure, especially the irrigation system. So the software means that when you reset up the collective system, means that the irrigation system built up in the countryside is more easier. If you're facing the individual households one by another, when you want to have an irrigation system, that will be more difficult because you cannot deal with every individuals. So when you set up the whole village system, and then you can give such kind of institutional base for absorb this infrastructure construction in the agricultural sector. So software and the hardware together, we may set up the base for the green security and the whole food security.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Wen Tiejun. Really appreciate it.
Okay, you're welcome.